Hello and welcome to the Car Games Kitchen Table. I'm Patrick Glysite and this is
Kat.
And we are proud to talk to you tonight about the theme approach for Commission the Call. So most people know that Commission is a 2 to 6 player cooperative game that deals with early church history, but maybe they don't know how we approach the theme. So Kat, can you talk to us a little bit about how Car Games approach Commissioned and then what we're adding with Commission the Call?
Okay, so Commissioned was a historical look at the early church. And we, in all of our games, try to be very careful about giving you an experience where you can explore a concept, but we are not going to tell you what to think about that concept. So Commissioned immerses you in the experience that the early apostles lived without us telling you what to think about that experience. You don't have to know anything about history to play. We've done the same with the call. We've tried to give you a rich tapestry of experiences to play through without telling you what you should think about those experiences, so you can make those decisions for yourself.
Great. So now that we've talked about the base game, Commission, what does the call explore thematically?
Okay, so this expansion deals with the conflicts within the church rather than the conflicts from outside the church.
So important.
Yeah. So whenever you have two people together, there's potential for conflict, either from personality, from different cultures, traditions, or power struggles. However, at its heart, Jesus' message was a message of grace. It was freedom from the need to perform. It was a move from rules to relationship. So what we really struggle with is holding on to that message of grace, right? So this is dealing with how do we avoid falling back into the rules and staying on the path of grace.
Okay, great. And so now what we're going to do in the rest of this video is kind of break it down section by section, chains module, solo play mode, new apostles, and just look at everything and how the theme for each of those sections breaks out.
Okay.
So the first thing we're really going to dive into is the chains module, which is our new optional layer of complexity for experienced players. It's compatible with all 7 base and expansion scenarios, which makes it very flexible. And it's targeted to enrich the deck building challenge and bring more player interactions to the table. That's what it's doing mechanically, and we talk about that on the Kickstarter page, but thematically, it's also very rich. Can you talk to us about what the chains module is doing?
Sure. The chains represent the hurts, hang-ups, and habits that we carry into life and our relationships. When we draw a chain card, we can choose to deal with it or ignore it.
At our own peril.
Yeah, it's going to continue to slow you down. So when we get to the mature phase of play, if we're still holding chains, the other players can try to help us overcome our chains through a restore action. The restore cards give scenarios for how a restorer might approach a person with a chain in their life, and offers the restored a choice in how they respond to that scenario. Your choices will have consequences, positive, negative, and neutral, in gameplay for you and the other player.
I think that's so important because it reflects real life. I mean, the church is full of broken people, and we're just not good at this. And so often, either the restorer approaches the person with the issue in a way that's not productive, or the person who has the issue, has the chain, is not open to being approached. And either way can really go south for us in a hurry. So I love how Chains explores how this can be done well and how it is often not done well. And so it's not a shoe-in when you use that restore deck, but it certainly brings about some interesting discussions around the table as you work through those scenarios. I think another thing that I really love about the chains is just the fact that it brings out that we are still a people in process. We're not there, we don't have it all figured out. And as I deal with those chains in my hands, I have some tough choices to make, because dealing with them on the board, it can be devastating mechanically, and it can really make the situation that we're facing a lot worse. But if I don't deal with it, oh man, you get to that mature phase and you're taking a heavy hit on what you're able to do, and that can be just devastating as well.
Yeah.
So we're going to shift now over to the new apostles, and this expansion took about 4.5 years to put together. So how did we end up choosing these 2 new apostles?
Okay, so first off, when you look at the population, half of the population is female.
True.
When you sit down to play commissioned, your only choice is to play a male character. And that is reflective of history, but not full history, right? Jesus' ministry was supported by women, and women were major contributors to the early growth of the church.
Absolutely true.
So we wanted to honor those contributions with some female player choices. And so we brought in Phoebe and Priscilla.
Awesome. And I really am happy with those 2 choices. But can you tell us a little bit more about how those characters, Phoebe and Priscilla, how they tie historically to their abilities within the game?
Sure. So let's start with Phoebe. So Phoebe is called a deacon by Paul. She was a deacon of the church of Sennacherib, and he said that she was a champion for the needs of many, and specifically himself. There's a possibility that Paul went through a sickness while he was there in that church, and that she might have nursed him back to health. We also believe from church history from the church fathers that she carried Paul's letter to the Romans for him. So what we've done with her ability is that as a servant, she was a force multiplier. She made everybody more effective. And so that is what she does within the game. First and foremost is she's a force multiplier. And secondly, she builds bridges between people. So she overcomes fellowship stops within the church.
Which is new to this expansion,
Yes, it
right?
is.
So fellowship stops actually can remove church members during the grow action if they're not addressed. So Phoebe is key, as a deacon would be, to really addressing those.
And keeping things running smoothly.
That's right. You got to have those people in place. Otherwise, your fellowship just does not work the way it's supposed to. What about Priscilla?
So Priscilla and Aquila were mentioned 6 times by the Apostle Paul. They were partners with him in his ministry.
We are in ours.
Yes. They were friends of his. They traveled with him on one occasion. He said that they put their necks on the line to save him in one occasion. And they were teachers. So they stand out in church history for mentoring Apollos and really guiding him into fullness of understanding about what Jesus's ministry fulfilled as being the Messiah. So he only had part of the picture. Priscilla helped to fill in the missing pieces. They also had a church that met in their home. So they're a great picture of marriage and unity and strength between a couple rather than one having to be superior.
And as a teacher, what are their abilities, or what is Priscilla's ability really bringing to the player options?
Right. So Priscilla does 2 things, again. She helps to minimize the impact of prayed chains. So if you're dealing with the chains, then that kind of helps smooth things over a little bit. And she helps you to mature faster. So if you choose her cards in your last round of play before a mature, then you get to pull your strongest cards and use those for your mature phase. So like any good teacher, she helps us to overcome our hang-ups, and she helps us to grow faster.
So important in the growth of an individual.
Absolutely.
And in the church as a whole. These new characters, I think, really add a lot.
They do.
To the, not just dealing with the expansion issues, but dealing with the base game issues as well. Super awesome to have them on the table. Okay, the next part, we're going to focus on the solo play mode. Moving into the solo play mode, this again is compatible with all 7 base and expansion scenarios, and it's important right now because of course we're in the midst of COVID and you might not be able to get your game group together. At least we're not getting our game group together. So this is a way to play commissioned, and mechanically it's also unique because it's not just one player playing multiple apostles to make the game work. It's a totally new system that lets you experience commissioned in a new way. But thematically, there's also something interesting going on the solo play mode, which we have over here. And you can see it depicts the Ethiopian eunuch. So Kat, can you tell us a little bit about that story and why we picked that art for the solo board?
Sure. So Philip has an encounter with the Ethiopian eunuch on the road. And then Philip is carried off by the Holy Spirit. He disappears. The Ethiopian eunuch doesn't have anyone that continues to teach him and bring him along. And we don't know really anything about him after that encounter. What we do know is that a strong, thriving church develops in Ethiopia. And so with the Holy Spirit as his guide, the Ethiopian eunuch goes back and he does big things. He makes Christianity a thing in Africa.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that makes that so powerful is that we often feel alone. And whether you're playing by yourself or you're just having a tough time, and it's very easy to feel alone and like the world is just too much for you to handle. But this Ethiopian eunuch is a perfect example of how God can do great things through one faithful person, right? And so our tagline on the board is "By yourself, but never alone." And we're just happy to be able to highlight this fantastic story of one man's faithfulness and what God was able to do through him. For our final section, we're going to talk about the scenarios, and Kat's going to turn the tables on me. So go ahead and fire away with your questions.
Yeah, you've made me do all the talking so far. So tell me about, we've got 2 new scenarios. One is the Council of Jerusalem. Tell me about that.
So the Council of Jerusalem takes place right after the first missionary journeys have taken place with Paul and Barnabas. And so they have gone out and they have started all of these new churches in predominantly Greek cultural areas, right? And so for the first time, we've kind of hit this inflection point in church history where there are more Greek churches than there are Jewish churches, and it's creating friction, right? We talked about the conflicts within the church. This is a cultural conflict that is happening, and there arose a group that was teaching that in order to be a Christian, you actually have to follow the Jewish tradition, the Jewish rules, right? And so that group was called legalists, and they were moving from city to city, kind of behind the apostles, teaching the new Christians that no, actually you need to follow these rules. Right. And so it triggers the first major in-calling of the apostles back to Jerusalem. And so Paul goes back to Jerusalem and he meets with James, the brother of Christ, and Peter and several other major apostles at that point, and they work through this. This is a big deal for the church. And in the process, the cases are laid out and heard, and they make a way forward for the Greek Christians to be able to fellowship with the Jewish tradition or Jewish Christians by basically laying out the bare minimums to allow contact between the people consistently. And that allows the church to continue to grow and spread and be consistent regardless of what culture that you come out of, and has a major impact in the church. So in the scenario, you actually have to move your apostles back to Jerusalem and collect the books of the New Testament, which in this case represent the stories that are coming in, that Paul and Barnabas are bringing in from the missionary journeys. This is what the Spirit of God has done on those journeys, and they're bringing that back to Jerusalem. They have the council, and then you go out and you remove the legalist tokens from the board. And so it is a powerful testimony to the good news of how the first council, the first major church council, was able to address a conflict and remove it.
Yeah.
So that's the Council of Jerusalem.
What I love about this scenario is that it's not just then. This tendency to return to rules is still with us today.
Oh man.
And so this opportunity to explore what does it mean to us as the church to return to rules, to abandon grace, is such a rich discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. Very fertile soil for having good conversations around the table when you deal with the concept of the legalist and going back to rules. And it's not just a Jewish tradition thing, it's any tradition thing.
Yeah.
And how those rules that we write for ourselves with good intentions can often lead us away from the relationship that we are looking to explore. All right, and now passing the torch is the second one. And that is a different kind of time stamp in history. This is now maybe, say, 20 years-ish forward after that Council of Jerusalem. And the churches have been established, and what the apostles are realizing is that as they move from place to place is that they cannot be everywhere at once, right? And as you read the New Testament, you will find that all of the new churches, they all had problems, and they were all different problems, but what they all needed was good leadership. And so passing the torch is about training up the next generation of leaders to go behind the apostles and really help these new churches work out the day-to-day, how do we do this Christian thing without being just a gigantic mess, right? And so what's happening in the scenario is you have different churches in different places, and the apostles can't be everywhere, so divisions take place in the detached, unprotected churches where they don't have leaders. And then as that continues, the churches can start to lose people or even get wiped out because of all the friction that's occurring.
And fighting.
So you've got to train those missionaries, and that requires the word. So you're going to pay those word cards into the New Testament to train new missionaries. So to win the scenario, you have to train those new missionaries, and you have to make sure that all the churches in the regions that you play with, and that changes based on the number of players, you have to do that and fill those churches in. So you're fighting the divisions and the growth and working together, and it's a really interesting balance, and it kind of gets to the heart of training pastors or training deacons. It's so important in the life of a church because we're broken people, right? And as broken people together, as we get together, we have broken problems, right? And we need people to help us through that. And that's what's going on as we play through the passing the torch. What do you like about that scenario?
Everything you just said.
Okay, well, that's good. That's good because we worked really hard on it. We hope everyone out there is also excited to play. I will say that passing the torch is the most challenging scenario that's in the box, base game or expansion. It is not easy to play. I just did a couple of demos at a recent online convention through Tabletop Simulator, and man, it can get bloody really fast. So we're wishing you all the best. But whether you're here for the new scenarios, the apostles, the solo play mode, or the chains module, we're so happy that you're with us for Commission the Call, and we hope you enjoyed this video.